because you want something close to a paved road. This is the parcel right up here, okay? Why it says Eastside Union Elementary School, well, that's the property. It might be the school district, I don't know. But in any case, that's the property, okay? And there's the coordinates, and that's how far it is, you know, to Lancaster. We're talking 16 miles. There's where the property is. Bam, you're right in the town of Lancaster, so you want to be close. If you truly did have somebody renting from you so that you could live there free, it's got to be close enough for them to get back to work. They're not going to drive 2 hours. So you've got to keep that in mind, okay? And some more information about it, and then it gets into, well, what kind of things could you put on there? You could put on there a shed. There's companies that specialize in that, and you being you said you rehab things, fix things? Did you?
I mean, I'm just getting into ADUs right now.
Okay, well, that can be done pretty easy. You could get in there and you could build that up with a crew of guys. You just order up the parts, it all comes in prefab. You could do something like that, okay? You can see the price of some of these things, but here's something interesting. Those are just 2 shipping containers. And over the top of it is solar, okay? That's another company. You can rent shipping containers. Not that you'd put this on something you rented, but you can rent them for $50 a month to start off. And I told the guy that is getting into this property, and he said, well, I'm going to go out and buy these, shipping containers. And I said, no. He goes, what do you mean, no? And I said, why would you go out and invest any money into any of this stuff until you're real sure what you're doing and how you're doing it? Don't buy it, rent it. And rent it with an option to purchase it later. He said, okay. But you could put something over the top of it like that. And if you face it properly to where any of these containers are facing south, then you've got something like this that, is that cool? And just about anybody could put that together in a short amount of time. The problem with a lot of these things is if you're not careful about how you're doing this, you're going to leave and you're going to come back and you're going to find out, hey, somebody stole my solar. What's going on? So you've got to be, and that's the other thing I do, is I tell them the other reason you want to rent out space on your land is because you then become security for them, and you watch their place when they're gone. They become security for you. They watch your place while you're gone, and you better have a good relationship, and you better be good at picking people who are your tenants so that when you're gone, they don't steal your stuff and leave, Yeah.
So, let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. You're buying 2 acres of land for sounds like pennies on the dollar.
Right.
And you're going over to person A and saying, hey, you can rent to own this land.
I'm advertising that, yep.
And then they say, okay, we're good. And then they go and they rent out other spots to other people
On that land.
on that land.
Even when they're on the lease to own. If they're just renting and they say, well, I haven't quite got to the point where I want to actually sign the contract to do a rent to own, lease to own, which is the same thing, then I'll just keep renting more spots out until I have 2 or 3 people on there that are all looking at each other going, somebody's better get this musical chair thing going on here, and somebody's going to get the ticket to ride and be the landlord of this property. Who's it going to be?
So how do you, if they don't pay, how do you evict them off of the land?
You go through an eviction process.
And is that the same as?
Not a foreclosure. Not at all a foreclosure, because you don't give them the chance to pay so much money down that, according to the courts, it looks like an owner finance deal instead of an option to purchase.
Would it be the same as like if I'm renting a home out and I need to evict someone from a home or an apartment or something?
Essentially, but at that
So you're
price
looking at
level,
like 6 months?
yeah, at that price level, you probably could go to them and say, hey, you're having a financial problem, right? Well, guess what? We're here to help you out with a financial problem. There's a place just 10 miles down the road that will rent to you month to month, and we'll pay your first month or 2 or 3. That's going to be a whole lot cheaper than evicting.
Right.
okay?
Pay them to move, it's cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm doing here that any realtor would go, you're getting into some deep doo-doo here, you could go to jail. You could lose your license. That's one reason why I don't have a license, is because it's a lot more flexible, especially to be able to do things nationwide, which this is nationwide, than to have to keep paying this huge amount of money at every state you go to be a licensed realtor.
So you're looking at like major cities, and you're looking at like 5 to 10 miles outside of the city.
Exactly.
Where there's a lot of land, you're buying it up and then advertising.
Exactly.
Hey, come put an RV on here.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, Jack Bosch never speaks about doing that in his trainings, and I'm going to show you him next. And never goes that low, but as I worked with AI said, you're kind of in the sweet spot, because there's a lot of people that can afford to do what you're doing, and a lot of people who can't or don't want to put down $1 million or $500,000 or whatever for vacant land, okay? And I went into AI one day, and I was talking to it about these percentages that it gave me, and it said, oh no, you can't do that. That sounds too much like a scam. And I went, you're the one that told me to do it. What do you mean it sounds like a scam? And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, you're not logged into your account, your Google account. It just thinks you're an anonymous idiot and doing this. And so I logged in and I said, okay, let's have that conversation again. Here's what you told me. Oh yeah, okay. It's kind of like putting the solar panels in front of the shipping container conversation. Yeah, okay, we can, yeah, I understand, okay, we're good. You know, it changes tune all of a sudden. And AI does have a tendency to tell you what you want to hear, so you've got to be careful. This isn't God yet. You know, someday maybe, but it's not yet. So in any case, there's some very inexpensive, easy ways to ease people into this stuff, and I'm telling them all the same thing. Don't buy until you're sure. Go out there and rent for a week. Go out there and rent for a month. Make sure you want to do this. And this guy that's got it right now, he says, yeah, the reason I want to do this is because I've got a 5-year contract to work for Edwards Air Force Base. He says, this is so close to Edwards Air Force Base I could almost walk. And I said, that's who I'm looking for. And so it takes time for those people to come to you, instead of all the people are going, I just need a place to park my car because I got kicked off of this street here in Los Angeles. I'm sorry, we're not going down that road, you know?
So then,
you know, there's two types of people I'm looking for. The young person who sees the dream, and the retired older person who is like, yeah, I could do that too, that would be my dream, you know? But not the people that are like practically homeless in the counties looking for ways to make them homeless, which is the saddest part of all of it, okay? So let's go over to,
Again,
yes,
Miguel, was that a question?
yes.
yeah, so how many of those types of deals have you completed?
Millions.
Millions
I've
of
done,
deals?
no. I spent about a year or two during the pandemic to get out of the 20 rental properties we had in the Midwest, which were already a nightmare dealing with property managers and tenants and everything else.
So specifically these types of vacant land deals.
These are the basic land deals that I'm starting off with.
So
Okay. Haven't done a lot.
You're trying this strategy out.
Yeah, and it's working, you know. I mean, this guy's like, oh yeah, I want to do this, Dan, I really do, and he is. I just know he is. He's an electrician, and he's done it for years. And he's probably about 40, maybe pushing 50. He can handle it. He can do this, and those are the kind of people I'm looking for. People who have the potential, not who are so desperate they're just looking for a place to go hide. Okay.
Where are you, now once you get like this one in Lancaster, how and where are you advertising?
Show you that. And this is the interesting thing I've been finding here recently, okay? So let's go look at New Mexico, and let me explain the difference, okay? Here's the property in New Mexico. It's 5 acres, and you're looking at the property with the mountains in the background, okay? That's the property. More Dow out there talking about rentals and do this and do that. Oops, here we go again. And some more comparables, okay? Now here's an example, and I took that example off of Lancaster because I didn't want to advertise the fact that I'm going to have a ton of rentals out there, especially if they got drones, and I don't want to invite problems, okay? But this is New Mexico, and this just happens to be in Socorro County. So, okay, there, and then it talks right here about Socorro County, okay? You see that? I went to AI recently and I said, okay, AI, give me 10 of the top places in the United States where I could do vacant land, and I have the least restrictive vacant land regulations to deal with. And it gave me a good list. I've got the list on here I could show you. Socorro County in New Mexico is one of those, okay? They're kind of like, we don't care if you have a trailer park out there. We don't care if you have commercial solar panels out there. We don't care if you have agriculture, animals, whatever. Have at it, do it, okay? So those are the kind of things that I'm looking for. And if you look at this,
And Dan, these are all unimproved properties? so
all
no
improved properties,
plumbing,
there's nothing on them, yeah, yeah. And I can't tell you how many times I've got to tell people, no, there's no hookup for solar, there's no sewage, there's no this, there's no that, but the potential is there to do all this. And imagine if these places were, 0.2 acres. Do you know how big 0.2 acres is compared to a space for a mobile home or a trailer in a park? Probably about 4 times the space, is my guess, okay? And so what I'm telling people right now that I'm talking to about this is, here's an example of a, oops, let's go back up here, I think it's up here. Here's an example of a trailer park in Arizona. And I say, okay, let's take the example of a trailer park in Arizona, how beautiful this is, how much money they put into each one of these. You can see how close they are together, okay? You could do something like this on the 5 acres, because I wouldn't be surprised that that trailer park that's on is probably 5 acres. It's not that big, okay? You can put some of these other things on there, and I actually put a link on here to 2 trailer parks in New Mexico that are within 10 miles of this property. And I tell them specifically, whatever you do, don't do another trailer park like they're doing. Because all you're going to do is compete with them at their price. And you can find out how much you're going to get just by looking at their price, because that's what you're going to get. But if you separate those parcels, and you're not giving these people something they own, you're just giving them a space. If you separate those spaces to where when they're out there they feel like, wow, this is really rural, and I'm not that close to other people next to me, I'm willing to pay more, you probably can get a lot more doing that than crowding up all these people and getting them really close together. And you're not competing with the other trailer parks because they don't offer that. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. Just do a couple of them so that you live there for free. You don't have to turn it into a business. There's a lot of people in the world that just go, Dan, I don't want to deal with tenants, especially if I have to live close to them. Do you know how many people get older and their kids move out of their house and they say, hey, the kids are gone, we have this huge expense, it's a liability, home ownership is a liability, it's not an asset, that's what they've been saying forever. You've heard that, right? Well, guess what? What changes a liability to an asset?
revenue coming in.
Income, exactly. So imagine that you were in an area where you were allowed to do this. Imagine people who, their kids have grown up and gone and they got this huge house that they could rent bedrooms out to, and a lot of people go, ugh, I'd kill myself before I had to live with a tenant in my house. Well, you know, one of the things they say for people who are getting up there in age, it's just good to socialize, keep the mind active. Some of our best friends that we've ever had have been tenants that we've rented rooms out to in the past. That we got to go be at their wedding, and our kids got to be up there with the flowers, and just all kinds of things. You know, if you learn how to pick the right people, and you never do any of the stuff I'm talking about with a year lease, and you only do it month to month, it's really easy. In fact, when I have tenants that don't work out for me, do you think I walk up and give them a 30-day notice and say it's time for you to move out? You know how I do it? I say, hey, you know what? It's not really working, and we're going to have to ask you to leave. But here's the notice, the paperwork that you can give me that says you're leaving. And if you tell me you're leaving, guess what I get to do? I get to be a good referral for you for the rest of your life. Anytime you want to move someplace, I'm going to tell them, yeah, they're great. They just moved on, they're great. But if they call up and they say, well, I understand you evicted this person, would you rent to them again? What can I say? I evicted them. Are you going to rent to somebody you evict? Probably not. And most times, the tenants will go, okay, they sign it. I'm leaving in 30 days. See you later. Have we ever had problems with tenants that wouldn't do that? Sure, in those rental properties, and guess what? My wife is saying to this very day, and we've been out of those rental properties now for, what do you think, 10 years? Pandemic was 2020? Okay, so now we're 2026, that's 6 years. She comes into me and she goes, hey Dan, look, we just got another $100 check from those tenants from 5 years ago. They want to get their credit straightened out, so they're going through a credit agency, and they're sending us checks every month for when they failed to pay that rent. Do you think I want to do a business where I can rely on that and hope that we get that kind of money? I could care less about that kind of money. It's just funny when it shows up. You just look at it and go, wow, somebody actually wants to do something with their credit, I guess, because they're paying us. Okay? So, you know, this is a good deal. This is another one. And why do we not care about proof of funds? Because now we're in New Mexico. New Mexico says you're doing a land contract. They don't get the deed until they make their last payment. If they don't make their, if they get through 4 years of a 5-year contract and they go, I just thought I'd get drunk and be somebody, and I checked out for 6 months, I don't know, you know. Well, I tell them, I'm not the guy that does the work. This is going through a collection agency. We went through an escrow company, a title company, and a collection agency. And you've been paying the collection agency since day one. The moment you quit paying, it's not me knocking at your door. They're knocking at your door. I'm here to help you. The one in New Mexico, the guy said, well, how much do you want a month? And I said, well, what do you feel comfortable paying? He said, I could pay $1,000 a month. And I said, I don't want $1,000. He said, you don't want $1,000, well, you want more? He thought I was being greedy. I said, no. How about $500? Why would you take $500? Because I want you to win. I don't want you to lose. If you think you can afford $1,000 a month and you commit to that and you sign up for it, you're stuck with it. If you have a hard month and you can't pay for a couple of months, what are you going to do? But if you're like living high on the hog and things are working, you can pay as much as you want a month. You're not on a lease to own, you're not on a rent to own contract where I'm going to get, you know, to deal with that whole problem. You're on an owner finance. That means you pay as much as you want every month. You want to pay me $2,000 one month and the next month pay me $500? It's up to you. You're going to decrease the amount of interest you're going to have to pay over 5 years. Why wouldn't you do it? He said, okay, so what's the interest rate? I can pay 10 or 12. I said, how about 5%? He goes, 5%? I said, same story. I want you to win. I don't want you to lose. I'm not doing this to go back and do it over and over. I'm doing it for constant cash flow and no problems. Okay. Do you need a credit check? No. If you fail, you fail. You know? Don't need proof of funds. in fact, one of the things that I do now on any of this stuff is I say before we sign anything, we have to do a video chat. Guess what that does? All the scammers in the world, the last thing they want to do is have their face on a video talking all this illegal stuff and thinking they're going to scam in the middle of that. So as soon as I say that, the excuses come up. Well, I can't do that. Well, I got technical problems. I've had people send me their driver's license. And I say, if we're going to go to the next step, you need to send me a copy of your driver's license. They send me a copy, and then we're just about ready to get into the video chat. And they say, oh, well, actually, that driver's license I sent you, it was fake. And I'm like, really? You're going to send me a fake driver's license? I've never talked to them on the phone. I've only texted or emailed. For all I know, I get on the phone and she would say, yeah, that's me. I'm Linda. And you know it's not a girl, it's a guy. And so I said, okay, well, how's it? Because she says, I don't trust anybody on the internet. And I said, so now you want me to trust you after you've given me a fake ID and admitted it? On a text? Text messages are just as good as email messages today in court. If you go to court on text, you're home free. She says, I will meet you out of the property and we can do our business then. And I'm like, yeah. Well, I've got, the Colt 45 in my head in the middle of the night. I'm not going out to meet anybody anywhere. And I just finally went, see you later. So there's all these steps that you go through to make sure that you aren't being scammed by somebody without having to deal with proof of funds. And if they're not going to jump on a video, it's one of the first things I say, let's do a video chat. That's why Dava says, we'll schedule up a video chat. How many people hear that and go, forget it, I'm not going to waste my time with that, I don't want to do no video chat. I'm a serious scammer. So you got to do that part of the business. Now here's the other part. How do you advertise? Facebook, Craigslist, you can do paid Facebook, but and you can do paid Craigslist. I ran an ad on this property in New Mexico through the MLS. How does somebody who does not have a license as a licensed realtor run an ad on the MLS? You can do it nationwide. It's real easy. I bet you know how.
My clients don't do that, but there are realtors that allow them to just pay a certain amount and they'll put it on that.
Doesn't that sound questionable?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the legal way to advertise on the MLS without being an agent or a broker. It's called a flat fee listing agreement with a broker. And all they do is say, hey, we're using our brokerage license to do a flat fee listing. You give me all the information you need. You put it all up there yourself, actually. And, you're home free. You got your listing. And I listed this property in New Mexico and recently had the company who I work with get back to me and say, hey, your 6 months are up. You better hurry up and get out there and do this again, when you got the opportunity. It's like, that's the first thing when you ask AI, is this fact or fiction? Any video, any website, any article, you just pull your phone up and say, is this article, is this video fact or fiction? And it will tell you immediately whether it's fact or fiction and why, okay? And when they start saying things like, you better hurry up and do this is your last chance, you got to jump on it. Here's the caveats in the advertising, which I found very interesting. I've got 3 different Facebook accounts. My account, my wife's account, and my deceased father's account. My deceased father's account brought me the buyer for Lancaster. And here's the weird part of it all. If you go out on your account, and I've seen this with my account, and you do paid advertising, it throws it way out. That's really good. But then what happens when you quit paying is it squeezes the amount of people that's going to get to your site. And from that point on, it says, boost. Boost another advertising. Boost another one. But it doesn't happen on my wife's site because I don't do paid advertising. And it doesn't happen on my deceased father's side because I don't do paid advertising. And it just keeps feeding it out there like it never happened. Because once you do pay advertising, there's not a human there keeping track. It's all AI. And AI says, oh, I paid once, you're going to have to pay again because we know how to manipulate and play this game and get you to spend more. You know, it's so funny how this works. But here's something even better. When you start advertising properties for sale, like in a certain area, New Mexico, Lancaster, whatever, last week, well, this isn't the example of that, but last week we had our friend come to me and say, Dan, I've got 5 acre parcels in New Mexico, in Socorro County. And I went, ding, 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 ding. Okay, I did a quick check. There's a website called regrid.com, regrid.com. You put in the APN number or the Google coordinate number, and it brings up the property. I brought up these properties, and I got back to him, and I said, Gary, so your relatives, your father died or whatever, left you these, you've got some relatives that you got to divide things up with, yeah. And it was 5 acre parcels, yeah. Well, I think the story over the years from your parents were, we've got 5 acres in New Mexico. And that story went from 5 acres in New Mexico to 5 acre parcels in New Mexico. And I said, they're not 5 acres, Gary. They're 1 acre each. Oh, I didn't know that. I said, well, do your homework and get back to me. He goes, well, I was hoping I'd get 20,000. I said, you're not going to get 20,000. We're paying 5,000 for 5 acres. 5,000 for 5 acres. You were hoping for 20,000, and you've only got 1 acre parcels. It's not going to happen. But, you know, go look at it, get prepared. We can help you out. We'll do something. Within a week of talking to him, I got somebody else came in and said, Dan, I saw your advertising and you're doing some stuff out here. I've got 6, and I'm not still sure if it's 5 acre or 1 acre parcels in Socorro County, New Mexico. And I'm like, ding, ding, ding. I'm not even putting out mailers like Jack Bob says. Put out these mailers, pay $500. I've done that and got no responses back. And now I'm getting people just wanting to, you know. I said, well, I'm interested. Will you consider owner financing? Yes. Will you consider lease to own? Yes. You know, these are all great things from people that I didn't even have to send a mailer to, and they're just showing up. Okay? So the more you do this, the better it gets. Tiny homes, container homes that can look like that. I've had people get to me and say, hey, I want a container home that looks just like that. And I tell them, you could do that, but you're going to pay 10 times more than you would a regular house by the time they get through doing that. I called the company up, and when they told me it was going to cost $200,000, I went, nah, got to think about that for a while. Or it's probably more than that, I don't know. So they look beautiful, and if you're the kind of person that can do the work, then you could do something like that. But you're going to pay people a lot of money to custom build that stuff for you. Okay? So let's go over to Real AI. Okay? This is something I found just recently. And again, all this information is right there on the site for you to go click on when you get home. You don't have to take notes. You don't have to figure out how to get back to it. You just got to get back to the Santa Barbara, work your way to this particular meeting. All that stuff is there. Okay? Real AI. I think this is Chat GPT or Real AI on top of Chat GPT. I can't say for sure, but somewhere along the line I started getting that. And I said to it, best states for vacant land with minimal restrictions. came up with gravel.